everybody to my very first episode of a new series I would like to call So You Want To. And what this series is, it's going to be not anything about gameplay or any of the background gameplay you see right now, but it's going to be essentially topics that I know a lot more about than the average person and my views and life lessons that I've learned in case somebody else is trying to follow in my footsteps. So in this week's episode, we're doing So You Want to Join the Military. Now, if you've never met me or I've never mentioned in a past video, I am actually active duty Air Force. I have been for about 5.5 years now, and I am slated for about another 2 years on my current contract. So all my views and all my knowledge and lingo is all going to be Air Force related, but a lot of the things, programs, and terms I'm talking about will also closely relate to the brother and sister services, the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Army. The Coast Guard is not technically, in case you didn't know, here's a little fact: the Coast Guard, which you can join, is not actually a DoD, Department of Defense funded uh, function. It is actually, I believe, FEMA. Don't hold me to that, but they are not DoD, so their policies and the way they do things are different from the major four branches: the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and U.S. Air Force. So, jumping right in to the meat and potatoes of this is I'm going to try and fit this all into one episode. If I can't, it'll be a two-part series. But my first part is, and the main theme I want to get it, making sure that you actually want to join the U.S. military. And a lot of people have a lot of different reasons for joining the military. I've heard people who just want, like myself, wanted free education and didn't have any college education, joined right out of high school. That was my reason for joining, but it's actually not the norm. The main reasons I've heard a lot of people joining is for free education and healthcare, or they, especially with the economy right now, lost their job and they needed some guaranteed money. So, the best way and the best idea, if the military is going to be a good fit for you and not really wasting anybody's time, because there's plenty of people who don't even last 6 months in the U.S. Air Force or any branch of the military, is before you join, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, do you have a stable job or a career that can ascend to the goals that you want to? And the reason I say that is because I've heard plenty of people. In fact, the person I went to basic training with was coming out of a stock trading company in New York City, and he was making almost 5 times what he was now getting paid to be in the United States Air Force. He joined because he didn't like his job. Even though he was making more money, he didn't have any time with his family, so he made the switch to the military, and good for him. And I'm not sure if he's still in, but I hope he is. So the first question is, do you have a stable job? And if you don't, is there other jobs and other careers available to you instead of the military? Those are the first real questions you got to ask yourself. The second question you got to ask yourself is, do you have college, or do you have college aspirations or degree aspirations, um, or not really? Myself, I was straight out of high school. I was planning on joining or not joining the Air Force. Before that, I wanted to go to flight school. I wanted to become an actual pilot, hence why I really chose the Air Force. But I wanted to go to, I believe it was the Dowling Flight School in New York City. Unfortunately, it was $40,000 a year with a minimum of 2 years, and I didn't want to incur the $80,000 of school debt while our economy was plummeting, so I made the conscious choice to do the military, and maybe I could fall back on that later. The other thing is, if you do have college, you do have an associate's or bachelor's degree, why not try talking to an officer recruiter? A lot of people say, oh, well, I don't really want to be an officer. You'll just end up sitting behind a desk because that's what a lot of Hollywood movies and a lot of outside shows and books have said to be an officer. But it is there is some sort of a truth to that. But when you're first starting out, your first 3 to 4 officer ranks, you're really not going to be behind a desk too much. You're going to be out and about, going with the troops. Whether you're in the Army, you're going to be in the FOBs with your troops, commanding them, or if you're in the Air Force, you could either be a pilot or the section chief of, say, a maintenance squadron or an aerial support squadron for the Air Force. So the second reason people with degrees say they don't want to become an officer is because they get in this mindset and they get glued in from Hollywood saying, oh well, uh, an E9 will be more respected and make a better difference with people than an officer ever could. And to that I say yes and no. I mean, and actually been blessed with quite a few good commanding officers, some good colonels who made much more of an impact on my life, not only personally, but the way I think and process things than any chief or E9 ever could in my life. And that's the great thing if you do decide to become an officer, is yes, you'll move around a little bit and you may be behind a desk doing some papers here and there. But once you put in your time and you can actually command 100 to 1,000 people depending on your rank, you actually make a bigger impact on everybody's day-to-day lives than an E9 ever could in his entire career. So that's also some food for thought. A lot of people just want to stay enlisted because they don't want as much responsibility right off the bat, and that's fine. The second part to making sure that you actually want to join the military is, are you married or single? And the reason I say this is because it's a very, very big transition joining from civilian life to military life. And when you do your 8 to, I believe, 14 weeks, is for the Marine Corps, 13 or 14 weeks of basic training, your significant other is not going to be there. You're going to be separated from your kids if you have them, your significant other, and essentially that's what basic training is they brainwash you and train you into becoming what the branch needs you to be. And so while you're doing your 8 to 13 weeks, your significant other is going to be with your children by themselves. They're not going to have very much contact with you. And when they finally do come to your graduation and get to meet you, you're going to be a very changed person. And it's going to be very noticeable right off the bat. So if you are considering doing the military and you are married or have children, maybe you divorced and you have children and you do or do not have custody, those situations had to be taken into account because there's a lot of people who actually go through divorces because of their actions of joining the military. Because believe it or not, a lot of significant others aren't prepared and don't like what their new spouse has become, let alone their responsibilities. If you're joining, say, the infantry, you're going to be gone all the time for the Army, and it's very taxing on a relationship. So if you're married, take that into consideration. In fact, I would probably take that more into consideration than I would whether or not you have a stable job. Because if you value your marriage, you value your relationship, then there is a chance that it could be fractured or at least strained from your choice to join the military. The third and final, this really isn't making sure that you want to, but if you are going to join, there are programs that a lot of the branches have that try to convince you to sign longer contracts. And personally, I am against it. I signed a 4-year. I'll wait and see how I like it. But I know for the Air Force, most of the time they have an incentive that once you graduate your training, out of basic training and your job technical training, if you sign 6 years, you'll make E3 right off the bat, and then you'll also make E4 6 months earlier. Now, a lot of people actually fall for that. Personally, I didn't. It was, they also, if your job has a bonus, which most of them don't anymore, they'll also try to offer you a little bit more money up front for signing a longer contract. The only thing I say don't do that is because if you join the military and say you don't like your job or you just don't like the military at all, you're stuck in for an extra 2 years of maybe depression or whatever you don't like about your job. Maybe you just don't like the military, you're not happy with your job, you're depressed, your relationship's getting strained if you're married. You're stuck in with the military for another 2 years because they'll hold you to that 6-year contract to the very day that it says you are no longer a part of the active duty military. And the second reason I always say contract length is because if you don't like your job, there are programs I'm pretty sure in every branch that allow you to cross train. Some are easier than others, some take more time than others, and a lot of them aren't guaranteed that they'll even look at you for a new job. However, in the Air Force, I know it's pretty easy to cross train in a new job. It's because when your first contract is called, it's a new term that if you're joining, you'll hear a lot of you're considered a first term airman, and what that is, you're criticaled into a zone because the U.S. military always wants to keep its new recruits because they just spent a bunch of money to get you trained, to fly you out to their basic training, to feed you, clothe you, and put all this knowledge into your head to be a good member of the U.S. military. So if you're unhappy and you want to get out, they want to make sure that they want to do their best to try and retain you as best as possible. And so there's a lot of programs out there that if you don't like your job, they will try and put you in a better job instead of you getting out. And so if you sign a 4-year contract, you can actually do that early. You can do that at your 3-year mark in the U.S. Air Force. I don't know about the other branches, but at the 3-year mark in the U.S. Air Force, out of a 4-year contract, you can start applying for new jobs. If you do a 6-year contract, you have to wait till your 5-year mark. So if you sign a 4-year over a 6-year, you can cross-train potentially 2 years earlier than the people that signed a 6 years. So that's always something that I say keep in the back of your mind when you're going through your recruiter and going through your MEPS processing. Getting into that, if you do sign up for the U.S. military and you're waiting and you go through your initial MEPS and you get medically cleared, the next step I like to call is preparing for the transition. And the best way you can do that is, and my number one rule is, get a job that you want. Don't join the U.S. Air Force if all you want to do is become an air traffic controller, but they're not giving you the job and they want to put you in vehicle maintenance. You're not going to like your life, I can promise you that. If you don't want to be a mechanic, but the Air Force says we need mechanics and we don't need air traffic controllers, they're going to try their best to put you in vehicle mechanics. So make sure that when you join, you can, if you have time, and say you join like I did when you're 17, you still have your senior year of high school, and all you want to do is become an air traffic controller, make sure that you don't sign or settle for a new job, because a lot of the times your recruiter can just sit there and wait and keep submitting paperwork to get you that job while you just finish your last year of high school. Now, if you have to join the military as quickly as possible, say you lost your job and you're about to foreclose on your home, well then yes, obviously you'll just choose whatever job the Air Force chooses for you will be your job. But if you have the time, by all means, stick to your guns and try to get the job you want. I can guarantee you it will be a much better experience while you're in the military, and it will be a much better transition as well. Another thing is whether or not you want to be overseas or not. I've known actually quite a few people who just joined just to see the world, and by all means, that's great. If you are single, it is much easier to go and get stationed overseas in Germany, Japan, Guam, the Philippines. There's anywhere and everywhere you want to go. England, Spain. I know that's just for the Air Force. The Navy, you can get on a boat and go pretty much anywhere. So if you're single and you want to travel the world, by all means, once you get into basic training, they will actually have a day where you go and set up what we in the Air Force have a nickname for. It's called your dream sheet. You tell the Air Force, this is where I would like to go. And if you don't want to be stationed stateside, all you have to do is put overseas bases. And 9 times out of 10, that's what your first assignment will be, was in overseas. Personally, I wanted to go to Germany my first year, mainly because it's legal to drink there, and I've always wanted to go and try out the Nuremberg and do all the traveling that there is to do in Europe. And being single, straight out of high school, I thought I had a very good chance, but I made the mistake of also putting down stateside bases that I would like. And what that tends to do is say, hey, he wants to go anywhere instead of he just wants to go overseas. And so 9 times out of 10, like myself, I got stationed in California, which was okay, but not really what I wanted. And as this video wraps up here, I'm probably going to cut this into 2 parts. But the last part I also have dealing with is you can also always change your station. Again, in the Air Force, it's called a first-term airman, and they try to retain you, and you can put in what's called bases of preference. And if there's an opening there, they can get there. The other and final thing is you can always go and volunteer for deployments. If you're married, it's a lot harder than if you're single, but I've known plenty of people who have gone and you'll do what's called a 365. You'll do a year deployment for the Air Force. 9 times out of 10, it's either Afghanistan or some Middle Eastern country where we have supporting bases for all the troops, and you'll do that for a year. And then once you get done with that year, you can put in for what's called a follow-on assignment, and 9 times out of 10, they will guarantee you your follow-on assignment. So the video's wrapping up. Tell me what you think of the new series. I have at least 4 more installments I'm going to do. This is part 1. If you guys like this, please let me know in the comment section. Like, subscribe, tell me anything, ask me any questions you'd like to. I have plenty of advice, and if I can't answer myself, I know people who can at least guide me in the correct direction to get you an answer. So video's wrapping up. Again, thank you for watching. Post your questions. I'll do my best to answer any and all questions I have. And until next time, this is Redbeard signing out. See you in the skies.